Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Francesca Donati. I'm Italian. My Muslim name is Zainab. I come from a small city in the north of Italy. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, it's a small city between Milan and Venice. So it's the center of the north. And it's a nice place to live in. It's very nice and quiet. There is a lot of nature, and it's very nice. We have, especially when I was born in 1974. I mention it because it was the time of the great changes, the great ideologies, and it was mid-70s, so especially in Italy, I can talk about that. It was the era of trying to reform society, even in a very revolutionary way, just to change all the injustice that there was at the time. Historically, Italy is the home of Vatican, so we have been very influenced very much from Catholicism, and the Catholic religion was the official religion until 1989, if I'm not wrong. So I was raised, and even at school, we were taught about Catholicism. And not even the other actually schools, Christian schools. So it was really very one voice about religion. I come from a variety of backgrounds because my family from my mother's side are farmers, and it's a very big family, and it's very unusual for Italy. 11 children, mashallah. So I have 11 uncles and aunties, and from my father family, still very Catholic, but much more on the, let's say, put it a little bit diplomatically. It's more on the being seen in the church, or in the right moments, in the right places. It was a little bit more on the sort of static and. Just because you are expected to be in the church at that moment for that kind of religious gathering, and not because of, sorry, now I will get in trouble with my family, but it's okay. So yeah, I had this kind of two dualities experience from the way of perceiving religion, and since I was very young, I could notice the difference. I was never your average girl. Since I was very young, I was very opinionated. My family would say stubborn, and yeah, well, I can live with that. If I didn't understand the reason behind something, I couldn't do that, even when I was 4 or 5 years old. And well, it was the 70s, so it was really difficult because, a good girl should behave in this way. A good girl should be expected to just, obey and be a good girl. And while I was a tomboy, I liked to play football, to get into fights with boys usually, and I was not really a girly girl. I was not interested into like clothes or this kind of even, for example, cartoons. I watched Goldrake, Mazinga. So these kind of boys cartoons. So I was quite different, if we can say. And I liked to think, to observe people, and to think about. To try to answer questions from a very philosophical point of view. And even if I was very young, I started to think about the meaning of life. why are you here? I remember I was 6 or 7 the first times that I started to think about these kind of things. And I'm guessing it was because I was raised a little bit more liberally, because being the 70s, it was the parents were trying to let go. So you get, you can be your own self. At least my parents were using this kind of mentality, philosophy. But still, the Catholic background was very present because of my extended families. But still, I was quite free of, thinking about the things because I spent a lot of time alone. I'm guessing that I started to think about this kind of very philosophical and very important questions because my encounter with death was since a very young age. When I was 2, I still remember it. Not even 2. My grandfather from my father's side, so his father, died, and then after not even a couple of years, my auntie from his side, so my father's sister, one of my father's sisters, died as well of cancer, and the most important, or the things that really was a very important thing that happened. My cousin, she was 7 years old, and I was around 5 or 6. So I started to. She died as well, and I started to ask myself: so why do we live and die? Why do children die? Why is it that good people seem to suffer more than not bad people? Why there is such disparity among people? Why there are people that suffer? Why there are people that they have wars? I was very interested in, and it was very important for me to find a way to be just and to sort of try to do as much as I could to bring justice into at least my small community, let's say, to my environment, because if we don't start from somewhere, we'll never achieve real justice around the world. That was my thinking, and I was 6 years old. I tried to talk to people, but it was the 70s and then the 80s. It was not really easy to find some adults that would talk to you, because you are a child, you don't understand. And I tried to, Catholicism was the only religion taught at school, and even on Sunday, of course, Sunday school. So I was trying to understand, about Catholic religion. I asked questions because I couldn't understand some doctrines. And I was talking about even, these kind of metaphysical and philosophical questions, but it was... at that time, there was not really that much of open mind. There were not very open-minded people, and so they said to me that I was just wanted to create problems, while I was just trying to find answers. But I understand that at that age, you think you may think that you have to accept it, and that's it. And it was the main way of thinking. So, and the answer that I got most of the time was, and it's a very, it's a pillar of Catholicism, it's a mystery of faith, so you have to accept it. And I can understand it up to a certain point, but still, it was not enough. So, I decided to talk to God by myself. I couldn't... well, now it's going on YouTube, so it is going to be funny, because I have my imaginary friend. Sometimes I was talking by myself, but in reality I was talking to God, because I had nobody who was actually listening to me. So I was talking to him, and I was trying to understand with my little my little experience of life, to understand things, why things are so bad in this life. And so I just made up the imaginary friend, because if we go around and say that you are talking to God, it's not going to end very well. And I understood that very early. But still, I was trying to keep my connection with God as close as I could, not having tools. Something that I didn't like, being a Catholic, that you were going to church just once a week, and there was this kind of detachment from your daily life, and the communication, this connection to God. And I thought it was wrong. In fact, at a certain point, I actually thought about becoming a nun. But because there are religions every day, but then I was thinking, why should you renounce to a part of your nature, that is the right to have in contact with your family, or to have a family by your own? So why, if I want to become religious, why do I have to renounce to this? I mean, is God made me in this way, and God wants us to have families to populate the earth. So it was not really making sense. So since I couldn't understand it, I didn't. I thought it was not the right path for me. Still, it was still the time of not having contact with other religions than basically Catholicism. But one episode that I think it's worth to mention is that when I was before I was 6, we went with my mother, father, and some friends. We went to Morocco. It was quite nice summer. We went by car from Italy to France, to all the way France, Spain, and then to Morocco. And what I remember the most is that one day we were sleeping into this very small hotel, and it was near a mosque. So I was woken up by this very beautiful music. Well, for a 6 years old, it seemed like music, and it was the adhan. And it fascinated me, and I felt it so much that I started to say, oh, this language is so beautiful that when I'm older, I want to learn it. So I want to be able to speak in the same nice and very touching way of this song, because at the time I didn't know what the adhan was. And this is something that remained in my memory for a long time. And in the meantime, when we went back, I had problems with my religion, because I couldn't find the answers I was looking for, and so I didn't proceed to all the steps to become a Christian. So to do the confirmation, for the Catholics, at least at that time, when you are around 12, you do the confirmation. That is basically to pledge your alliance to the Catholic Church, and to reiterate that you are, it's Catholicism, your religion, is your religion, and you believe in it. I couldn't. And that created a lot of problem in my family, because they were not very happy about it. But again, if I didn't understand it, I couldn't do it. And I was 11. So from the religious point of view, I stopped I didn't stop believing, never, alhamdulillah for that, but still I couldn't find, I said, okay, religion, the establishment is not for me, so we'll talk to God like he's my friend. It was monologues, actually, because he didn't reply to me. But, I got, sometimes I remember, I was thinking about why is that? I was thinking about specific things. And then I got, when I was observing people, for example, I used to read in the park, or I used to read books, and I got answers from these books. So yeah, my approach to religion was quite strange or unorthodox, if you want to. I, at the same time, in this same period, I started to read a lot. I had, at that time, there was not one library card for the whole city, so I had the 7, 8 of them. So I used to go, my trip, the weekly trip to the several libraries. And I used to read, I like to read historical books and also sort of this kind of adventure books. And in particular, I liked the books that talk about people that, it was quite naive and maybe romantic in a certain way. People that change society because they put themselves, at risk because of their beliefs, and so since they believe in, in change, and they believe in social justice, they just put themselves out and they risk everything just to put, to have a society that is more just and more humane. So I like this kind of books, and even films. I used to watch films like Braveheart, one of them, because I thought, and I still think that people must be able to decide for themselves and not from someone else from another country. Let's not do names, but yeah, and. So the really sovereignty of my culture, my country, my culture. I decide. We decide. Our people decide for our country, and not other external people that come and want to democratize you. These kind of things, and so these kind of I liked also samurai movies. They were, because I always admired this kind of mentality of a samurai. Samurai is a person that dedicate his life to the greater good of the community. So they put their life, they train every day because they have to be ready to defend their communities. They live up to their code on some extent, that when they understand they fail, they kill themselves. That part I didn't really like it, because you cannot make amend. Once you make a mistake, but you have to be able, okay, you broke something, you did something wrong, you fix it. You just don't go away, So this kind of, this part, I didn't like it about the old school samurais, but, I liked the thinking about these people. They were dedicating their lives to protect and serve the community, and they lived by the book of their honor and the moral code. And these things in the West are not there anymore. So, there is a lack of direction, a lack of moral compass. With the so-called freedom, we actually sacrificed most of the moral codes that they were good. So instead of throwing the bad of our society, we actually ended up to throw most of it. I was still, and as said, my way of thinking about social justice was really very present, and sometimes I don't know if it's okay to say, but yeah, it's okay. I actually got into trouble, for example, fighting bullies at school since I was in the elementary school, because I couldn't stand injustice. Not that I was perfect, but bullies and people that want to oblige you to do things that you don't want, or they want to, to come and steal your stuff with no reason and for nothing, just because they are bigger than you. I cannot stand it. Even if they are going to beat me up, I don't care. I have to do something. I have to try at least. At least, I can be okay with my conscience. So that was my way of approaching life. And in the same period, I started to investigate of political ideologies. So I started to be sort of active in trying to give back to the community, try to help homeless. And then one big thing happened. It was 1991. The first Gulf War, so the bombing of Iraq by NATO, let's say it like this, and I remember there are a few NATO bases in Italy, and one of them in particular, it was Vicenza. It was quite close from my city, and so we started to try to through demonstrations, even chaining ourselves to the binaries, to the trails, just to stop the trains that were taking supplies to the NATO base, because from there, there were a lot of aircrafts that were sent to bomb Iraq. And for me, I was 15, almost 16. For me, it was unacceptable that someone else, just tried to decide over other people. And this was one of the things that I tried to do. It didn't help out really that much, but we tried to stop these kind of things, or at least to make people aware that there is something behind it. It's not because you want to free people. And so, I was always trying to make other people understand that the society we live in is not good. I used to watch people, and I thought, I tried to think about, how people behaved, and I noticed that most of people started to do, basically they lived their life on autopilot. They were not even. They were almost unaware of what they were doing. Yes, I'm a good citizen. I do my job. I go to work. I go to school. I come back. I do my stuff. But are you really living? Are you really doing something what you want to do? So did you really find yourself and understood what's your role in this life? What are the particular gifts, particular things that you have that nobody else has, and try to put yourself at the service of the society? And the answer was that most of people didn't even think about that. So for me, it was very shocking, because, as said, I started, to ask myself these kind of questions since I was very young, and to understand that even adults, they just live their lives, but without even thinking really about the real meaning of life and real meaning of even not knowing themselves. So for me, it was really strange, and I couldn't understand how you can live your life like that. So I was trying to satisfy my sort of thirst for social justice, and feminism was one of the things. In the Western countries, women have been really oppressed for a long time, and we lacked the basics of human dignity. That is really a patriarchy. Patriarchy in the real meaning is that, the paterfamilias, so the head of the house, the man of the house, the man in charge, has the right to life and death of all the people in their households. So it means that not only they have the slaves, because it's ancient Greece. So not only the slaves, they were basically under the mercy of this man, but even all the women of the family and even the children. And that was, I think, unacceptable, because we are human beings, and so we have to, even children, they are human beings, even if they are not adults and they are not maybe the same intellectual capabilities of adults, but still, they have to have the dignity of human beings. And on the female side, women didn't have the possibility to vote, didn't have the possibility to have their own wealth, because it was all, especially before, it was the father who was in charge of the women, and they didn't have any possibility to have money or to have their own properties. And then, the husband would take them, and they couldn't vote, they couldn't participate. They were basically ghosts. That was completely wrong. So feminism in this sense brought basic human rights. Oh, let's not forget about the church that was still investigating in the 19th century whether women had a soul or not. They actually finally acknowledged the fact that women are human beings with a soul. Basically, it was latest 19th century, so yeah, it was not even 150 years ago. So in that situation, of course, feminism was important, because there was such an imbalance that it was not sustainable, and that was something that really interested me while. When I started to read about Islam, investigate about Islam, because it was a whole another perspective. I finished, when I finished high school, I went, my dream was to go to learn Arabic. At the time there was just one very famous university. It was Naples. It was the Oriental University. So, but it was very far and very expensive. I had to work. So I couldn't. So I went to another university that offered a few courses in Islamic studies and Arabic, and it was in Bologna. I started to study Arabic. And then also Islamic history and Islamic religion, history of Islamic religion, actually. It was more on the historical point of view, and without even having to say that, it was all from a Sunni point of view. But it was the period when after so many years of trying to fight for social justice, I felt it was not enough. Because the ideologies were not actually covering everything, and I felt there was a void, a sort of a very big chunk of my life and meaning of life missing, and I knew that I had to find, something that could, make me feel whole. So when I started to investigate about Islam, I found out that, so women are actually considered human beings with a soul, with dignity and the possibility to vote and to vote. Not at the time there was no vote, but yeah, there was alliance. So to participate in political and social and religious life, and it was the 7th century. While we in the Western countries started to have some rights at the beginning of the 20th century. So for me, it was quite of a shock, positive shock. And so I started to try to deepen up, and I found, so this religion is talking about social justice, morals, in the everyday practice, not just praying to God as your personal stuff, just because you want something from God, but just as gratitude, as sort of try to find your place in life and give back to the community through this connection with God. So it was very fascinating and very nice to find, so maybe we are in the right track. And at the same time, I was actually investigating other religions, but they still didn't click, let's say. And even Islam at that point didn't click very much, because studying history, I noticed that the book was something, and then the so-called representative of that religion were something else. So the caliphs were supposed to be religious and political leaders. But honestly, even if I didn't really, I was not really into the whole doctrinal rules and everything. It seemed like another galaxy. So the book, Islam, was saying something, and these people, they were supposed to be the representative leaders of the community. Even the religious ones, they were so far away from Islam that was unbelievable. So I couldn't accept it, because if I believe in a religion, I try to, in anything that I believe in, I try to apply it 100% in my daily life. Of course, I may make a mistake here, mistake there, but I try to keep myself in the right way and follow the moral code that I'm saying that I'm following. But history clearly shows that the caliphs were quite far from it. So I was drawn towards Islam, but still, it didn't. All the pieces of the puzzle were not actually fitting. In the same period, a friend of mine gave me, just because I was a bookworm, I still am. I just read everything. This friend of mine gave me the biography of Malcolm X to read. And it was incredible, because I was really, I read about the Black Panthers movements in USA, and what they did for the communities before getting, the name of terrorists and, the black sheeps, that the black sheep, against the society in that way that they got later on. They were doing incredible things for society. And seeing that this person found, what was missing from his life in Islam was also another, push towards Islam. I didn't mention some other kind of strange things that happened to me when I started to think about maybe Islam is actually the right religion for me. Some very strange things. Subhanallah. Now I know that it was, there were signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were pushing me towards becoming Muslim. They happened, in several occasions. So I got, towards, Islam has an answer for that. So I had problems. Sometimes you get through difficult situation in life, personal things, hardship, and problems with my family, because they didn't accept that I was not Catholic. I was not thinking about. I just left my home just to go to study, and they were not very happy about that, because I was just trying to choose my path by myself and not following religion, their religion and their way of thinking, what they expecting me to be and become. So, it was, I was a little bit, it was difficult because, as you love your family and you would like to make them happy, but at the end, you cannot live a life if you don't believe in it. And so I was a little bit, it was difficult for me to just try to be by myself and just to try to make decisions by myself, knowing that I was actually hurting them up to a certain extent. But I couldn't live a lie. If I don't believe in something, I cannot follow it. And that's something that I didn't understand, because I was expected to follow certain things and to become certain things, and but I couldn't do that. So through these kind of hardships that everybody goes through, I always found sort of signs from God, and sort of like He was my cheerleader. Sort of like don't keep going, because you are doing this for you, and it's not just because you are rebelling just for the sake of it, but just because you want to find the truth. And even though it would have been easier, to follow my family wishes and just do whatever I was expected to, but I couldn't do that, and I still have problems with my family after almost 20 years of being Muslim. But yeah, alhamdulillah. I mean, you have to accept the good and the bad. Back to that, I was still investigating, and I was still in the Sunni area, because there was no, especially in Italian, there was nothing basically from a Shia point of view. But still, even reading history, so you're saying that this person, you believe that he's your prophet, he's not even dead, and you are already starting fighting for who is going to be the successor after him. That was one thing that was really not adding up to the supposed moral code. And the other thing, so you read the explanation. I didn't actually get hold of a Quran at that time, and even if I was, the Italian translation is very bad now. I can actually appreciate that, but still, it would have been, sort of. There was this very bad translation of the Holy Quran in Italian, but if you read through it, so you say that God sent 124,000 prophets. For each community, for each culture, there is a guide. And then after you say that this is the last one, and I say, guys, now, this is the last one. So that's it. You're on yourselves now. Doesn't make sense. If God created us, He sent 124,000 prophets, it is because He knows that without guidance, we cannot stay on the right path. Because Shaitan is powerful, and our ego is very, very, very weak, and we get, bad character traits like, ego, pride, and egoism. So we tend to, okay, I will just take a shortcut. Shortcut here, shortcut there, the right path is gone. So if you believe that God, He's your creator, and He sends 124,000 prophets, how is it possible that after the last one, there is no guidance at all? I was starting to think that even the Quran that we had was tampered, because reading history of the church, it's very clear, and they admit it, they changed the scriptures so many times, and they actually admit it. So if this is the word of God, and you just basically erase, the things that you don't like, how much of the religion of God actually remains? So I started to think, that even for the Quran it was the case, because I was just looking for just comparing the book, the bad translation that I had to the history, and so I started to do some sort of very deep research, and I came across this fantastic website, that alislam.org, and I finally found my answers. So it's not true that there were not guides. I mean, the religion is complete and perfected. So the religion is good for each and every community and each and every time after the time of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now there is no need to amend to just try to make it fit of the communities, because we believe that actually the 124,000 prophets were talking about the same book. Even if they were written in different ways, the messengers were talking about different angles of the same religion, but it still was the same religion. So after, the religion, after the Islam, so the Quran came, doesn't need any amends, anything. It doesn't need anything more and less. It's perfect as it is. But still, it's nonsensical to believe that from that time to the Day of Judgment, there wouldn't no guide. We wouldn't have been sent some guides that can actually keep us into the straight path, to the right path. So, and then I just discovered, and I got to know the whole stories about the whole descendancy of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wa ali, and I read about Imam Hussein, salamu alayhi, his sacrifice, his the way that he stood against injustice, and he knew that he was going to be slaughtered, not just murdered, slaughtered. And he had to go through incredible suffering. And he knew also the family, the rest of the family, what they were, what would have happened to him. But still, he knew that to save Islam and to stand against injustice, it was the right thing and the only thing, the right thing to do. And also other, I read all the story of all the imams till Imam al-Hujjah Jalalawat al-Faraja, and he will bring real justice. He will bring real justice and harmony in this life, in this earth. So when you have the truth in front of you, what more could you ask for? It all made sense, and you have to admit, you have found the truth. So now it's time to become Muslims, alhamdulillah. So so I recited my Shahada, and I remember the first days. Not a little bit. I'm a quite OCD person, so I was trying to learn Arabic and pronounce the Salah perfectly, so I would pray 50 times per day. I was trying to train to two rak'ah, at least, the basis. I remember it was a little bit, so a little bit too extreme maybe, but I remember, it was hard work, but I felt I was home. Alhamdulillah. So then I got to know a few other converts, Italian, and I found out that there was a small community of Italian reverts, and but they were quite scattered, around Italy. But after a few years, alhamdulillah, we managed to open an Islamic center in Rome. And it's still functioning and does good job, alhamdulillah. And we put together a translation group just to translate things into Italian from a Shia point of view, because there was basically nothing. And then after we had, a few things, we started to think, why don't we share them? How can we do, can we share, just put, our translations, that they are translations, but still, another point of view about Islam. So I contacted alislam.org, and I just asked them if they wanted to host Italian resources. So I started to work with them, and it was 16 years ago. And then I was very happy, the brothers are amazing. So we started to work on other languages, non-English first. So for example, French and Spanish. And then since I'm quite good at organizing and keeping track and keeping people on the right track, I started to put together a sort of volunteers team for the English resources as well. So I started to coordinate these as well, and now I've been in the management for 13 years, sort of. So Alhamdulillah, and it's very good because while I'm preparing a file, I'm proofreading, so I'm reading the file, so I get for myself knowledge for myself first, and I try to apply. Well, of course, not as perfectly as I would like, but I try to apply, the right path into my life, into my daily life, and to. At the same time, I upload them online so that other people, inshallah, will be benefiting and will gain knowledge, and even non-Muslims, they will know another voice about Islam as well, inshallah. The advice that I can give to people that are researching, talk to people, of course. It depends on how is your approach? For me, it was books, because I wanted to have my personal time to reflect and ponder upon the things that I used to read. While when you are talking to people, it's less easier. It's not that easy in any case, but when you read, you can read 5-6 times, while, asking people, the same person, 10-15 times the same question, maybe, they will think that you are a little bit strange. But that's personal. I think try to talk to people, but be careful, because we are human beings, so even the most perfect of and religious person can make mistakes, and try to verify the information that you get from the person. Even if you think that this person is trustworthy, just try to double check. Not because you don't believe in that person, but because unfortunately there is something that I noticed in the communities, the born Muslims, is that sometimes they don't understand how much of their culture is linked to the Islamic practice or the way that they live Islam, and sometimes it's not really that Islamic. I know that I'm entering a difficult path here, but being an outsider, sometimes it's good because you can observe and try to. You have a little bit less of difficulties, even because you have already sort of rejected your culture, and so you can see it a little bit more in an objective way. If this behavior is really Islamic or is compatible with Islam, or not really, it's just cultural for this kind of culture or community. And maybe it is applicable for them, but it's not necessarily accepted, in whole Islam. So think, ask, think. And one thing that I would like to suggest, don't be shy. Ask, write down any kind of question you have. There is no stupid question. There is no silly question. If you have a question, you have the right to get an answer, and to get the most comprehensive answer as possible. There are a lot of books in several languages nowadays, alhamdulillah. There are a lot of YouTube videos. There are a lot of great scholars out there. They're actually so kind. They reply to queries. They really they are there for the community, both Muslims and non-Muslims, to understand and to just discuss and try to get other points of view. So if you see one other suggestion, if you see that the person starts to no, but this kind of questions are not good, be careful, because sometimes these people, first of all, they don't know the answer, or they don't want you to get to dig deeper. So you should really analyze and understand if this person is there for you or not. Then you are, of course, free to choose your path, but think very carefully, because at the end we have to remind ourselves, after we will be dead, there will be a time that will ask us, why did you follow this religion? So you have to be ready to reply to that. You have to be ready, and you have to try your best to follow your beliefs. Not easy. There are bad days, easier days, bad days. But yeah, that's our basically the meaning of this life, I think.